fans, it is me again, Toy Bonnie, and I found a video on YouTube that called Josh Hutcherson confronted critics as they gave Five Nights at Freddy's 2 horrible ratings. I mean, what the hell, critics? My toy animatronic friends and my wife and I worked so damn hard on the fnaf 2 movie for a few months from 2024 to 2025, and you jerks give it a horrible ratings? Damn you. Sorry fans, since my animatronic friends and my wife and I work so hard on the movie, I just get overprotective of the fnaf 2 movie. Same thing with the games too. But if anyone tries to say hard things about hard work my friends and my wife and I did for, I will snap and get mean out of anger. So, yeah, I bet the beginning of this video is really going to piss me off, but I hope the ending will calm me down. So, here we go.
Have you seen the new FNAF trailer?
Alright, I watched Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and I can proudly confirm that critics can go eat a chunky pile of bricks because the movie was not a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. FNAF 2 was most definitely peak. With what I'm trying to make is that the movie's terrible reception is more overkill than the amount of midterms university students get throughout the semester, because this was actually such a fun time in the theater. So let's—
I don't know if you've taken a look at the reviews for this movie, but they are not good. As of Friday morning, 12% of the 59 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive, and that makes it one of the worst reviewed movies of the year. But having seen it for myself, I don't think it's that.
All I know is I was hearing them saying that this one was supposed to be bigger, bolder, more animatronic, scarier. They listened to the fans and they were gonna make true on those promises, and well, I seen the movie. I sat down with Mr. Fazbear and Chica, and I'll say, yeah, they actually did listen a little bit to the fans.
But yeah, look at this. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is overall terrible. I mean, it's just nonstop of like these critics saying this movie stinks. Like, it is the worst thing. Why did I waste my time? It goes on and on.
And unfortunately, I simply don't think that that's the movie that they delivered. It just kind of felt like an empty film. That there just wasn't much there at all on any level.
When Five Nights at Freddy's 2 finally hit theaters on December 5th, 2025, fans were ready to lose their minds. The hype had been building for months through cryptic teasers, mysterious animatronic reveals, and the return of Josh Hutcherson as Mike Schmidt, and all of it convinced everyone this sequel would top the first movie in every way. But the moment early reviews dropped, the internet exploded. Critics hated it, scathing headlines calling it a chaotic cash grab and soulless.
Am I the biggest Five Nights at Freddy's fan in the world? Nope. But, did I see the first film? Yes. Did I like it? No. But, I could understand why others did. So, I just saw the second film. Did I like it? Nope. But this time, I can't understand why others seem to like it.
And one article flat out said Five Nights at Freddy's should have stayed a game. And yet, while critics were tearing it apart, fans were flooding theaters, cheering, screaming, and posting nonstop. Social media turned into a war zone within hours. Critics on one side, the FNAF community on the other. But here's the thing, something unexpected happened. Josh Hutcherson himself stepped in. Most actors stay silent when critics attack. Hutcherson spoke up. He clapped back at reviewers, calling them out for missing the point of what the film was all about. In one quick interview clip that went viral overnight, he said something that completely flipped the narrative. This movie isn't for critics. It's for the people who kept this story alive when nobody else believed in it. That single sentence hit like a bomb. Fans rallied behind him. The clip racked up millions of views, and suddenly the question changed from why do critics hate this movie to why do critics keep underestimating fan-driven films? And that's the story we're diving into today. How Five Nights at Freddy's 2 became one of the most divisive films of 2025, and how Josh Hutcherson's fiery response turned the tables completely. But before we get to his confrontation, we need to talk about what really triggered all this outrage in the first place. Early reviews for Five Nights at Freddy's 2 dropped on December 4th, and the tone was savage. Major entertainment outlets didn't hold back, with some critics calling it a cheap nostalgia trip, others saying it relied too much on jump scares, and one even claiming it was an algorithm-made horror film with no heart. The numbers were just as harsh. Rotten Tomatoes showed 28% from critics against 92% from audiences. That gap was enormous, and it instantly became a headline. Every outlet focused on the critics' side of the story, claiming audiences were just blinded by fandom. But here's the thing, the more they the movie, the more fans seem to love it. If you actually watch FNAF 2, you realize it knows exactly what it's doing. The sequel leans into what made the first movie such a phenomenon: the mystery, the lore, the tension that keeps you watching every dark hallway scene. Critics didn't see that. They complained it wasn't cinematically elevated enough, whatever that means. Horror movies based on games are supposed to be ironic, or artsy, or self-aware, according to them. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 doesn't care about that. The film is unapologetically for the fans, filled with nods to game theory videos, hidden Easter eggs referencing the original FNAF timeline, and subtle connections that only longtime fans would notice. Critics wrote entire paragraphs roasting the film's story, calling it nonsensical, too fan-driven, and lazy. They missed the point entirely, because this movie wasn't trying to win an Oscar. The goal was capturing the weird, dark, nostalgic feeling of sitting in front of a screen at 3 a.m., trying to survive the night. Online, fans were quick to fire back. Tweets and posts flooded the timeline with statements like, "Critics just don't get FNAF," and "They never understood the games, why would they understand the movie?" and "This isn't for them, it's for us." The tension built for days. While critic reviews dragged the Rotten Tomatoes score lower, audience ratings kept climbing. The divide became symbolic, critics representing the out-of-touch establishment and fans representing the heart of modern fandom culture. But the critics' disdain only made fans louder. People were defending a community, a decade-long passion that critics had laughed off for years. And right at the center of all that noise was Josh Hutcherson, watching the chaos unfold. When you dedicate months of your life to a film and pour your heart into a project that means something to millions, seeing it ripped apart by people who clearly don't get it has to sting. And soon enough, he'd make it very clear that he wasn't about to stay silent. But before we get to that fiery response, let's talk about what was happening on the other side of the screen. Because while critics were writing takedowns, fans were breaking box office records. If you were anywhere near the internet during the first weekend of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, you couldn't escape it. Fan reactions flooded TikTok, YouTube, and Reddit with glowing reviews, reaction clips from theater crowds, and endless debates about the ending. Despite the critical panning, the movie dominated the box office. That's when everyone realized something bigger was happening. Critics weren't driving the conversation anymore. The fans were. The FNAF community had basically turned the release into an online festival. Hashtags like hashtag FNAF2 deserves better, hashtag In Josh We Trust, and hashtag Not For Critics trended for days. Fans even started posting comparison videos showing snippets of critics the film next to audience reactions of people screaming and cheering during key scenes. The contrast was hilarious, but also kind of powerful. What this proved was something Hollywood's been ignoring for years. You can't measure passion with critic scores. This wasn't a random horror movie trying to cash in on nostalgia. It was a love letter to a fan base that had kept the franchise alive through theories, memes, and lore discussions for over a decade. Fans loved how FNAF2 expanded on the lore, exploring Mike Schmidt's trauma, the darker secrets behind Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and the new animatronics that made the audience jump out of their seats. The movie even dropped hidden details hinting at sister location and the infamous bite of 87, which fans immediately started dissecting online. And while fans were hyped, the success hit critics where it hurt most: the numbers. Reviewers who had confidently labeled the film a failure had to watch it crush every prediction. The audience score became a statement. You don't have to like it, we do. Even mainstream outlets started shifting tone after that, acknowledging the film as a fan-driven phenomenon. But by that point, the damage was done. The line had been drawn. Critics on one side, fans on the other. And right in the middle stood Josh Hutcherson, who was about to say exactly what everyone in the fandom had been thinking since day one, because what he said next changed everything. Josh Hutcherson had been quiet at first. While critics and fans were clashing online, he was out doing interviews, smiling on red carpets, and letting the storm play out. But that didn't last long. Once the noise hit a boiling point, Josh finally spoke, and his words lit the internet on fire. It started during a press junket just days after the premiere. A reporter asked him what he thought about the movie's terrible critic reviews. You could see it in his expression. The question hit a nerve. He leaned forward, gave a half smile, and said calmly, "Look, this movie wasn't made for critics. It was made for the people who grew up staying up all night playing FNAF and trying not to get jump scared. They're the reason we're here." That one line, "This movie wasn't made for critics," exploded online. Within hours, it was trending across TikTok and X with millions of views. Fans started quoting it in their b-ball, in edits, in meme posts celebrating Hutcherson as a kind of hero for fan-driven cinema. But he didn't stop there. In another interview, he doubled down. People forget that movies can just be fun. Not everything has to impress the same group of reviewers who expect every film to win awards. Sometimes it's about giving fans what they've been asking for all along. The tone was respectful, but you could feel the frustration behind it. Critics had labeled Five Nights at Freddy's 2 mindless fan service, yet that fan service was exactly what made people love it. Hutcherson wasn't trying to please everyone. He was defending the idea that not every story has to fit the same Hollywood mold. Fans rallied behind him like never before. The hashtag In Josh We Trust shot up again, this time fueled by admiration, not not irony. Memes flooded in. Clips of Hutcherson's serious tone turned into remixes, edits, and even reaction compilations. He had become the unofficial spokesperson for every fandom that's ever been roasted by critics. And what's wild is, even some critics started to soften. A few admitted that Hutcherson had a point. They might not have liked the film, but they respected the passion behind it. Because whether you love it or hate it, FNAF 2 clearly struck a chord that critics couldn't ignore. Hutcherson had grown up in that internet generation, the same one that turned small online games into massive cultural moments. He knew how much this movie meant to fans who had been with FNAF since day one. And for many, seeing him defend the community so openly was something special. It wasn't PR polish or a studio statement, it was genuine. You could feel it. But while Josh's comments were earning applause from fans, critics weren't done yet. They started framing his response as defensive or immature, trying to downplay what he said. And that only made fans more furious. Because when an actor defends the people who supported him, the ones who actually paid to see the movie, it's not defensive, it's loyalty. And that loyalty became the fire that pushed FNAF 2 even higher. But before we dive into how his words reshaped the entire conversation, we need to look at why critics seem to always miss the mark when it comes to fan-made hits. And Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is the perfect example of how out of touch that divide has become. For years, critics have held on to this old-school idea that every movie needs to fit a certain formula, the cinematic experience as they call it. Deep dialogue, slow pacing, metaphors, prestige. But movies like FNAF 2 break that mold completely. They're not about symbolism or film school perfection. They're about feeling, the tension, the nostalgia, the chaos, the things that make you jump, laugh, and remember why you loved stories in the first place. Critics called FNAF 2 too chaotic, but that's exactly what fans loved. The film captured the unpredictable, terrifying vibe of the games, the flashing lights, the distorted laughter, the jump scares that hit just when you think you're safe. It wasn't supposed to be artsy. It was supposed to feel like FNAF, and that's where critics completely missed the point. They weren't watching the same movie fans were watching. Fans saw a love letter. Critics saw a flaw list. The divide got so bad that fans started comparing critic reviews to fan reactions side by side. Reviewers saying the plot made no sense, while fans posted, "You just don't get the lore." Critics saying too many characters, while fans said, "Finally, they gave us the full roster." It was almost funny, like they were watching two different films. But the deeper truth is this: critics have been losing influence over what audiences actually care about. Social media changed the game. People don't need reviews anymore to decide what to watch. They watch fan edits, TikTok clips, or reactions from creators they trust. And FNAF 2 is proof. Even when critics trashed it, word of mouth carried it straight to box office gold. What's even crazier is how the film's success started forcing Hollywood to pay attention. Executives saw the numbers and realized maybe fans are the new critics. Maybe listening to them actually works. It showed that passionate communities, not elite reviewers, decide what stories matter now. That's why Josh Hutcherson's words resonated so deeply. And that's what makes this story more than just about a horror sequel. It's about a cultural shift, one that critics didn't see coming. But if you think that was the end of it, think again. Because Hutcherson's defense didn't just spark headlines, it triggered something even bigger inside the fandom itself. Once Josh Hutcherson's comments started spreading, the internet practically turned into a battlefield. Everywhere you looked, people were calling out critics for being out of touch, elitist, or just plain salty that a horror game adaptation could outsell some of the year's biggest blockbusters. Within days, hashtag FNAF2 deserves better was trending again. People were sharing box office numbers, fan art, behind-the-scenes trivia, even side-by-side comparisons of critic scores versus fan reactions. It became a movement, a digital rebellion led by a fandom that refused to be talked down to. TikTok edits with Hutcherson's "This movie isn't for critics" quote exploded. Some turned it into motivational edits about passion and creativity. Others remixed it into memes, syncing his words to epic music with captions like "When the fandom wins anyway." It was everywhere. What really threw critics off, though, was how united the fandom stayed. There wasn't any divide between casual fans and hardcore theorists this time. Everyone had the same mission: prove that this movie mattered. Fan creators started making videos breaking down the lore of the sequel, analyzing tiny background details, secret codes, and post-credit clues that critics completely ignored. And the best part? Every time one of those videos went viral, it pulled even more people into theaters. Viewers who hadn't seen the first movie were suddenly curious about why this sequel was such a big deal. Box office numbers jumped again in the second weekend, something almost unheard of for a horror sequel. Meanwhile, critics were stuck in the same loop, trying to defend their negative reviews while the film they'd dismissed just kept growing. Some even deleted old posts after getting ratioed thousands of times. One viral tweet summed it up perfectly. Critics tried to bury this movie, but the fans turned it into a legend. That's when it hit everyone. People started comparing it to other moments when fans took control. The Snyder Cut, Sonic redesign, No Way Home leaks, all moments where audiences shaped the outcome. And now, FNAF 2 was officially added to that list. The message was clear. Critics could write whatever they wanted. But fans had the numbers, the passion, and the internet, and that combination was unstoppable. One built on loyalty, nostalgia, and a shared sense of, you don't get to tell us what's good. But what made it even stronger was how the filmmakers themselves responded. Because instead of trying to appease critics or backtrack, the people behind FNAF2 doubled down. And that decision changed everything about how studios saw this franchise. While all the chaos unfolded online, stories started coming out about how Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was made, and suddenly fans realized just how much love had gone into it. Unlike most big studio sequels, this one wasn't built by a corporate checklist. It was made by people who actually cared about the lore. The director, Emma Colt, a fictional addition, was a lifelong FNAF player who reportedly worked with creator Scott Cawthon himself on the story beats. They spent months weaving in subtle references to game moments fans would instantly recognize: the echoing phone calls, the creepy static, even the exact sound design from the original jump scares. Critics called those cheap callbacks. Fans called them masterpieces. Josh Hutcherson himself talked about how involved he was with the lore this time around. In one behind-the-scenes interview, he said, "Every scene had a hidden meaning. Even the lighting, the colors, everything ties back to something in the games. We wanted the fans to feel like they were inside the FNAF universe." That attention to detail is what critics completely overlooked. The feeling of dread, the tension, the clues hidden in the background, all the stuff that made the original games addictive. The production team also slipped in cameos from famous FNAF YouTubers and streamers, subtle Easter eggs that had fans screaming in theaters when they caught them. Some appeared on posters, others as background security footage, or even quick one-liners over radio chatter. Every discovery turned into a viral TikTok moment. Even the film's score was designed for nostalgia, echoing distorted versions of old in-game tracks that sent chills down fans' spines. Critics said the soundtrack was too repetitive. Fans called it the sound of their childhood nightmares. FNAF 2 was made by fans for fans, and that was exactly why it worked. It didn't need to chase Oscars, it just needed to honor the people who kept the franchise alive for 10 years. When fans learned all this, it only strengthened their loyalty, and that's when the energy shifted completely. Instead of being embarrassed by the bad critic reviews, people started wearing them like a badge of honor. 28% on Rotten Tomatoes became a meme, a symbol of how little the critics' opinions mattered anymore. One viral comment summed it up perfectly: "If critics hate it, it's probably perfect for us." By the time the third weekend rolled around, FNAF2 was unstoppable. And just when everyone thought the story had peaked, Josh Hutcherson did something that pushed this whole phenomenon into legendary status. By mid-December, the FNAF 2 phenomenon had evolved into something far bigger than a movie release. It became the internet's favorite underdog story, a battle between fans and critics that everyone wanted to be part of. And the spark that reignited it all was Josh Hutcherson's next move. A few days after his "This Movie Isn't for Critics" clip went viral, he dropped a surprise post on his social media accounts, a black and white photo of him standing in front of a movie theater packed with fans. The caption, just 3 words: "For the fans." That post broke the internet. Millions of likes in under 24 hours. Fans flooded the comments with gratitude, inside jokes, and messages thanking him for standing with the community. Even people who hadn't watched the movie yet felt like they were part of something bigger, a kind of internet uprising that blurred the line between actor and audience. Soon, fan accounts began calling Hutcherson the protector of the fandom. Meme pages crowned him the people's champion. Edits of his movie scenes were spliced with his quotes about loyalty and passion. It was insane, but also kind of inspiring. On TikTok, fans started showing up to theaters dressed as animatronics, chanting, "This movie's for us," at midnight screenings. Critics, meanwhile, started realizing they'd underestimated the cultural weight of what was happening. Some tried to backpedal, suddenly publishing think pieces about how FNAF2's success represented the power of internet fandoms. Others doubled down, claiming it was just nostalgia hype, but by that point, nobody cared. The fans had already won. Even Hollywood insiders began taking notes. Executives quietly admitted that FNAF 2 had done something revolutionary. It had completely bypassed the critic pipeline and still made a massive profit. That scared them a little, but it also opened their eye. And Josh Hutcherson's fearless loyalty became the heart of it all, something people rarely see in Hollywood anymore. And that honesty turned him from an actor into a symbol. So while critics were busy debating what real cinema meant, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was quietly rewriting the rules of what success looked like, because this time the people decided. But there was still one question hanging in the air: what's next? Because after this kind of victory, fans knew there was no way Universal would stop here. By December 21st, just 2 weeks after release, critics had moved on, but fans hadn't. The box office was still climbing, theaters were still selling out, and online theories about a third movie were spreading faster than ever. Rumors started flying, whispers of a secret end credit scene that hinted at Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Some claimed it showed a glimpse of a burned-out pizzeria sign. Others swore they heard distorted laughter in the audio mix that didn't match any known animatronic. Whether it was real or not didn't matter. The speculation alone kept the buzz alive. And while fans hunted for every clue, Josh Hutcherson stayed humble but proud. In one final interview of the year, he summed it up perfectly. People are going to talk. Critics, reviewers, whoever. But at the end of the day, the fans showed up. That's what matters. They made this movie what it is. That statement hit just as hard as his first one. It wasn't angry, it was grateful. You could feel the the respect he had for the fandom that refused to back down. And honestly, it's hard not to admire what happened here. In an industry obsessed with numbers and prestige, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 reminded everyone that passion is still the most powerful force in entertainment. Critics measured it by stars and percentages. Fans measured it by heart. The movie's story might have been about surviving the night, but its real story was about standing your ground, about refusing to let someone else tell you what you're allowed to love. When the credits rolled on that second film, the message was clear. Against expectations, against critics, against the idea that fan projects can't be real movies. And if there's one lesson Hollywood should take from all this, it's that authenticity wins. When you make something that feels real to the people who care most, they'll carry it further than any marketing campaign ever could. As for the fans, they're already waiting, dissecting every frame, every sound cue, every glitch for signs of what's next. Because if Five Nights at Freddy's 2 proved anything, it's that you can't destroy a story built by a community that refuses to let it fade. And as Josh Hutcherson himself said, this one's for the fans.
Okay, good. I like Josh Hutcherson. It's because he has defended the movie against negative reviews. Josh Hutcherson and I are friends. Because I was acting in the movie, and we were both talking about defending the movie from critics' negative reviews. And I know you fans already know this, but I will say this anyways. Hutcherson's statements and actions have been part of a broader fan response that has turned criticism into a positive cultural phenomenon. So that means, he is not letting critics from ending his part in the FNAF 1 and the FNAF 2 movies as Mike Schmidt, and no stupid critics are going to take it away from them. I am so glad that the critics realized that they'd underestimated the cultural weight of that, and I am so glad that some of you fans, maybe all of you, are thanking him for standing with the FNAF community. Good job, keep it up. And fan accounts began calling Josh Hutcherson the protector of a fandom. That is a nice name. Anyways fans, I am going to hang out with my wife and our daughter, Toy Chica and Toy Bonica. And I know New Year's Eve is in 3 days, so happy early New Year's fans, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.